few years ago, when my son was in middle school, he would every so often ask me an odd question. "What's your favourite apocalypse?" "What do you mean?" I would ask, puzzled and a bit impatient. "The apocalypse isn't a colour, or an ice cream flavour, or a band, or a book. It's not the kind of thing you have a favourite of." "If you had to choose," Raphael, my son, would say. "I know you don't want any apocalypse in real life, obviously. But if you had to pick one, what would it be?" He would offer alternatives. Would I prefer an apocalypse of fire and explosions, burning forests to the ground and reducing cities to rubble? Or an epidemic, contagion spreading ruthlessly from person to person and nation to nation? Or would I choose his own personal favourite, a zombie apocalypse, hiding out in the woods with a stash of rations, building shelters from sticks, starting campfires with birch bark and twigs, on the run from legions of the living dead who march through the land with their arms outstretched before them, shredded skin hanging from their limbs, eyes rolled back in their skulls? His own eyes would shine as he described this last permutation of the end of the world, and I would know where his favourite apocalypse was set, at summer camp. For a few years, he attended an all-boys camp in the mountains of Vermont, trading his Brooklyn bedroom for a rustic cabin overlooking a lake. There were lessons in knife skills and fire-starting skills. There was a climbing wall, strenuous hiking, and a fair bit of idling. At least that was what my husband, George, and I could discern from the very occasional letters our son wrote home. One time we received a long letter in which he confessed to having accidentally set a patch of hillside on fire when he and a couple of other campers were playing around with a contraband box of matches. What could have been a disaster was turned into a cautionary lesson. The 3 boys had their fire privileges revoked for the rest of the season. The envelope was covered with penciled postscripts, scrawls of mortification, though later he would turn the story into a comic anecdote. That time when some real-life danger intruded into the highly curated pseudo-risk that the camp specialized in. The camp was intensely rustic, with no electricity in the cabins and no flushing toilets. A cup full of sawdust tossed down the black pit, that'll take care of things. There were bonfires and cookouts and thrilling mass games conducted by flashlight and moonlight. Every session ended with a banquet for which inventive counselors decked the dining hall with festooned greenery and papier-mâché sculptures like a stage set, then dressed up in costumes like something from A Midsummer Night's Dream. The camp had been founded on Quaker ethics, which had morphed by the 2010s into an observance of secular, progressive principles. Campers and counselors stated their pronouns upon arrival. The environment offered an antidote to the popular culture in which boys like my son were daily immersed. Electronics were forbidden, and there were no movie nights or candy Fridays, as there were at some of the camps his friends went to. At the same time, there was also a highly intentional intensification of the contemporary currents of liberal parenting as they were observed in the part of brownstone Brooklyn in which I lived. Lord of the Butterflies, that was how I thought of the place. I was enchanted by so much about it, and at the same time, it drove me a little crazy. So it was clear where my son imagined his favourite apocalypse transpiring, there, in the sun-warmed freedom and privileged primitivism of a Vermont summer. Meanwhile, he got his apocalyptic ideas, his rich array of alternative end times, from a culture saturated with entertainment that offered the enticements of incipient destruction and violent demise. At the bookstore, he'd be drawn to thick volumes with lurid cover images, a scythe-bearing hooded silhouette, or the close-up quadrant of a young face that was not so different from his own, with brown hair flopping over a green eye, though the skin in the illustration was pallid and grey, and the terrified eye was rimmed with rust-red shadow. When we rode the subway together, he studied the movie posters featuring cataclysmic images plastered on the platform walls. The White House in flames, helicopters circling overhead while a tattered American flag burned, a cityscape of scarred skyscrapers and crumbling bridges. There were images of square-jawed men equipped with exoskeletal body armor and guns so oversized that the combatants would surely stagger under the weight of them, like the kids who haplessly attempted to wield foot-long water pistols in summertime battles at the playground.